Okay, y'all, we are back in the shop. Yay! We're not building right now, though. Taking a break from that just for a little while. I wanted to kind of get going on this YouTube channel and my tutorials. So, as I stated in my last video, we're going to do videos of Eivor, the cosplay I built and it just debuted at Rose City Comic Con about a month ago. And we're going to go head to toe. And we're going to go through all the pieces and parts, show off all the details. My little 1-minute Snapchat videos weren't able to show all the details, and I wasn't able to go through all of the stuff that I took to build things. So, since we're going head to toe, we're going to start at the head, which is this wonderful helmet. And I'm going to show you and kind of talk through how I did that. But we're going to start with an unfinished one. I actually have an unfinished one because I'm going to make two. First off, the 3D model was created in an open source program called Blender. My husband Brian spent very many hours in Blender creating the 3D model, putting in all the details, and measuring our heads with calipers to get the correct measurement so that we know what the right size to print this thing at. And then once the model was completed, then it goes on into the 3D printer program, gets printed. After all the false starts and errors, which happens with 3D printing, we did it in 4 parts. So we have the main bucket, we have the kind of face nose covering, and then we have the sideburns, or the mutton chops, I like to call them. And so those are all the parts of the thing. So with 3D printing, so mine doesn't come out gray like this. Mine is either white or black. That's just the color of the PLA we use. And you can choose many other colors, but white or black, since it's going to be sanded and painted anyways. And speaking of sanding, 3D printing, lots and lots of sanding. It's horrible. It's a dirty process. You get tired of it. Your hands hurt, but it's all part of the 3D printing process. Fortunately, with this one, because there was so many details on it, all the Celtic knots and such, I didn't have to do as much sanding because I was not going to be able to get into all the crooks and nannies in between. So I did as well as I could with sanding. Now, if you're doing for like a mirror finish or something like that, obviously you're going to have to do a lot more sanding. In this case, fortunately, woohoo, not good, I didn't have to. Once I was done with the sanding I needed to do, I first sprayed it with this filler primer. Now, Rust-Oleum has one, and so does Krylon. And as long as it's filler primer and it's sandable, which is the important part, that's what I use. I just happen to have Rust-Oleum on this one. I've used Krylon as well, but the filler primer stuff is really helpful. Spray that on. Do some more sanding if necessary. And then the next step, which again, I've learned from another tutorial because I do lots of, tutorials, watch lots of tutorials, to get it smooth, because when you 3D print, there's always little lines, and that's just from the print. And the filler primer actually helps get out some of those. The sanding helps get out some of those. And then also, what I learned is this, which is to use this is Bondo fiberglass resin, and it's some pretty stanky stuff and pretty toxic stuff, so you always have to wear a ventilator mask when you're using it, but really, really, really thin on here to help smooth out. And then once that's dry, it can be sanded if necessary, but if you do it in very thin layers and a little at a time, you shouldn't need to sand it. It's kind of self-smoothing. And then after that's done, then I learned this from some Ewok costume makers from the Washington State SummerCon. And I was given the tip that after the fiberglass resin, to put another layer of the Rust-Oleum on there. Fabulous suggestion. That's what I did, and I cannot tell you how happy I was with doing that. So those are the steps to get it ready for painting. So, and I also fiberglass the inside. One of the good reasons to fiberglass, not only does it help smooth it, but it also protects it a little bit more. This stuff's not super duper brittle, but it definitely needs, depending on how thick you make it, it definitely needs some strengthening. And then I also fiberglassed on the inside of the one that I used because it's hot, no ventilation, sweat. It, you know, the water, the sweat, steam from my head. We didn't want it to break down the PLA or ruin it. So once that's done, then that's when the painting begins. And initially, I was not smart on this. Initially, what I tried to do is come in with a teeny tiny paintbrush and paint all the blue first. And then plan to come back in and get the details. Too much time, stressing out. So I basically painted all the sections blue, just with my, right here, Apple Barrel 2 blue is the blue I used on this. Painted all the sections that needed to be blue. And then once I did that, I got my Rub and Buff, which is right here. It's a wax-based product. So I use the silver Rub and Buff with paper towel, Q-tips, anything I could use to get into kind of the smaller areas to put the detail on the Celtic knots. I know, right? And then, so many steps. So then after that, and so I did this while it was in pieces and parts. I didn't glue it together yet. I waited until afterwards. And then once I was done with that, then I taped off just with painter's tape so that it would pull off and not pull off any of the paint that was already on there. So, you know, the non-super sticky stuff. I covered all of the blue and silver areas, left the rest of it, which was going to be gold, and then I just used a Krylon metallic gold to paint the remainder. Spray paint, spray paint, spray paint. Let it dry, pulled off, reveal. So as it's going along, and if you followed along on my Snapchats, you kind of saw this little bit of process a little at a time. Super exciting to pull off the tape and see that the paint worked. And then that's when, after some touch up, that's when I glued things together. So using, on the 3D model, the tabs that were created, again, when the 3D model was made, and then also holes right here. And then see on these pieces, so you've got the holes here. And it needs a little sanding after you have the primer on there. I didn't put fiberglass on those parts, but like the primer to make sure they fit in the holes. And this is more for stability. I still glued it, and so these tabs go in here to put it all together. And I used a little bit of super glue, but I also used this fast set acrylic glue type stuff. So that's what went in the holes around the edges when I put things in there, let that dry. And then once they were dry, then around all the edges is where I put the super glue, just to kind of add a little extra protection, stability to the project. And then also, so on the inside, for my mutton chops, just to add a little more protection, just in case, I took a strip of leather and glued it on both sides, as you can see, just to add more protection. And then, because the helmet was just a little too, like when I put it on, it was just a little too low, I just took 10 millimeter foam, just took a spare chunk of 10 millimeter foam, put it in here. It's not even glued in. This actually just has double-sided sticky tape, so if I wanted to pull it out for some reason to do that. And then, as you can see, even with my glasses on, but that 10 millimeter made it where it fit perfectly on my face. And then, you know, when I turn my head, it's not flopping around a lot. And that, my friends, is kind of a quick and dirty tutorial on this. Basically, Let's get some closer uppers on here. Look at all that detail. I think I heard more swears about Celtic knots than I will ever in the rest of my life. And it held up well, didn't break, you know, was not entirely uncomfortable. Since it didn't cover my whole head, it actually breathed a lot better than I thought it was going to. And then to store it, like you can see above me, some of my helmets are just stored sitting on the shelf here. And what I'm doing now, actually, and I'm working on, is I just went to the Dollar Tree and I bought myself just a bunch of paper towel holders, the metal ones. And I'm going to go to like Michael's or something and buy like little domes for, you know, for doing flowers and stuff. Put that on there. That way I can store my 3D printed helmets upright this way. And then it'll kind of make more room. So, please like, subscribe. If you have comments or questions, put them down below. I will hop on them as soon as possible. And thank you for watching my first official head to toe. Next, I think we'll go over probably the tunic. And I'll show you what it looks like up close, the detail up close, and how I put it together. Awesome. See you later.